Hi, I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc, and I invite you to journey with me today as we explore the changing dynamics of the new workplace and the paradigm shift. We've had a clarion call to rethink how we show up at work, remote, hybrid, on work entirely. But not only are we rethinking our workspace, we're also rethinking how we engage with one another. And I'd like to share with you some words that were said by Dr. Justin LaPalooza back in April of 2020, when the pandemic was just starting. As a psychologist like me, he works actively with people in the workplace regarding emotional distress. And what he found out even early on, we were only 30, 40 days into the whole pandemic, that people had a strong need to be heard, to feel cared for, to be protected, to be supported, to be respected, and to be honored. And so as leaders, as we show up in our work world, really important to be mindful of what people's needs are and how people are showing up. And so on that note, I want to share with you that it's really about how to coach forward feedback. Too often feedback is about criticizing what's happened in the past, finding out what's wrong, where they're at fault. And quite frankly, it brings people down. Instead, what we want to focus on is how can we help develop them, help promote them moving into this new world of being. Because our world is very different from what it used to be. It will not go back to being the same as before. Now, I do know from actively teaching and engaging with employees from different kinds of organizations, for some organizations didn't really change at all. But for the vast many, organizations in the workplace have changed tremendously. In fact, some of the more recent statistics are that like 44% of people want to continue more of a hybrid version. Nearly half of our working population. As you probably have heard with new jobless numbers, people are seeking to change industries, seeking to change careers based on their ability and flexibility to work differently. So this notion of hybrid takes on a whole new flavor. And when we also consider the events of this last year, I again go back to Dr. Justin LaPalooza's words: hear me, protect me, care for me, honor me, respect me, support me, guide me, develop me. Everyone does matter. People are people. We are all part of the human race, that big, big family. And so when we talk about connecting with people differently, it is about looking at developmental opportunities at every level, every phase of the organization. Are we showing up with moral clarity, for example? What about civil respect? Acknowledging that we do view the world differently. That's very, very evident from the last year or two. Are we rooted in integrity? Are we buttressed by courage? I always like to say, to be courageous, we have to be curious. We want to learn. But to be curious, we also have to be courageous. To step out, to seek information and understanding from others who may know things that we don't. I think probably one of the biggest challenges, some might even say mistakes, is that leaders, whatever level they are, feel that they have to know all the answers. Not. Instead, what's so important is that as leaders, we know how to seek out information from others. And so I take you back to my 360-degree perspective. Whatever the issue is represented by my fingertip, I am looking at it from just one perspective. Now, I might have a range of perspectives, but I'm still only seeing one side of my fingertip. And the only way I can grow and develop my people is by reaching out and asking, how do you see things? What's your perspective about this issue? Now, We are creating a climate of engagement, a climate of inclusion, and a climate for learning. Is sharing how people see things differently, because we don't live in a vacuum, and we can only do so much training and education at any given time. Instead, there are so many rich opportunities if we just take the opportunity to learn from others how they see things. And now we're building a foundation for much better decision making by gaining more information. How do other people see things? So are we recentering our focus in new ways, or are we staying stuck in old ways? I like to say the same old mindset leads to the same old results. And as leaders, we're really stewards of people. We are responsible for how they grow moving forward. If we're unsatisfied or dissatisfied or upset with how people are performing, I would suggest let's first start taking a look at ourselves. Perhaps we're not being the kind of steward, the kind of facilitator that people need. Maybe we're being too limited in how we look at things. Because what we, after all, want to do is to try to create an environment of psychological safety. Because when we feel safe, we feel emboldened to take risk. We feel emboldened to try something new. We feel emboldened to communicate about differences without acting out negatively on those differences. And so, again, I go back to Dr. Justin LaPalusa's words: hear me, protect me, care for me, support me, direct me, guide me, respect me, honor me. And so those are all words of wisdom that we can live by. And so again, to create psychological safety, we also have to be curious and courageous so that people can move forward. You know, the foundation of our world was shaken, but not broken. And we see so many different things happening today that we didn't a year or 2 or 5 or 10 years ago. You know, 9/11, 20 years ago already, and the 2008 recession really showed us that the resilience of our society and of our people, and about how we can come forward and take the steps to come forward in ways that may not have existed before. In just this last year, we've been thrust forward 10 years for how and where we work, how we meet up, how we engage, and how we connect. A court of innovation, deliberate, strategic, and conscious steps with consistency and grace for what people need at work and at home. And in that regard, then, I want to remind you all that these are opportunities for learning in terms of how we show up. And so when we talk about coaching forward feedback, it's to recognize, we're always in a state of learning. It's from what I call unconscious incompetency. There's always some time when we just don't know what we don't know. But then something happens. Oh my gosh, I need to learn more about this. I need to do some research. I need to talk to other people. I need to do some reading, something like that. And so now we're consciously incompetent. We know what we don't know, but then we can seek out to learn. And so as we do that, we become consciously competent, but we don't want to stop there. We want to get to a space, a place of where we can readily apply what we know. Hence, becoming unconsciously competent. So it's a phase of competency that we want to build. It's a phase of competency in understanding the many layers of culture that exist in our workspace and in our lives. And it's about how to coach people forward, up, down, and all around. And so with that, it's about identifying what's working well. What is somebody doing well? Acknowledging people for their presence, their performance, acknowledging people for their effort, acknowledging people for their attitude or accomplishments, and acknowledging people for their contributions and how they face up to challenges. That's what I call peak performance. When we do that, it's amazing how that will light up people's eyes. helps them know and understand that you are paying attention to how they show up in the workplace, and therefore how you show up in the workplace as a leader at whatever level you are. That's what I talk about coaching forward feedback, letting people know, acknowledging them. And acknowledging people for their peak performance is not the same as understanding where they're coming from. Because you know what? You may not. We all have different life experiences. I go back to the 360 perspective, in that we all come into the world looking at things differently and shaped by our past experiences. And so with that, it's understanding that everybody has a different perspective. And it's learning about that perspective, learning from that perspective, that is so critically important. And this applies whether you're a leader, whether you're a mediator, whether you're a lawyer, whatever profession you might be, whatever level of profession you might be in your industry. It's all about learning from others. And how can we gain? How can we benefit? And I love what my mentor had to say, Dr. Dan Dana, a business psychologist. He oftentimes talked, simply comment on what you observe. Simply comment on what you observe, whether it's verbally or behaviorally. And keep in mind, 38% of how we communicate is by tone, volume, and inflection. 55% of how we communicate is through our behavior. So showing up with a positive facial experience, a smile, a glimmer of the eye, a handshake, all of that makes a big difference in terms of how people respond to you. What is the other percentage? 7% of the words. And not that words are unimportant by any means, they're powerful. But it does mean that we need to be conscious, mindful, and selective of the words that we use. So words matter. Leverage your influence through the words we use, how we show up in our behavior, how we come across with our tone, our volume, and inflection. And so with that, then we can enter into our positions of leadership and influence with consistency, predictability, certainty, leading to stability. And when we do that, we are now creating an atmosphere of psychological safety that will then influence people to actually perform to the best of their ability and to feel safe enough that they can speak up from their perspective and that they'll be heard in ways that are not critical. So I want to share with you a particular feedback mechanism that I really love, and I've found it very valuable for many, many years. It's called 2 stars and a wish. And what I mean by that is when you approach people and you're looking for change, it's powerful to start off with what are 2 things that the person is doing well, that you can compliment them on, acknowledge them for, whether it's their presence, their effort, their attitude, or their contributions. Again, peak. And then identify one thing that you'd like to see them improve upon. I see what you're doing here, and I have some suggestions for how you might do that differently forward. So building a climate of psychological safety, how to coach feedback forward, how to coach forward feedback, because feedback oftentimes looks back, but just like giving back, it's something to share forward. So I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc, coaching forward feedback, all about decoding the conflict mindset. Thank you for joining us on Decoding the Conflict Mindset. This series was designed to bring to you the best in thought leaders to shape new worlds of thinking about working through disputes in the world, in your community, and in your home. Subscribe so you receive notification every time a new episode is launched.